evening, everyone. I am Dr. Drew Lichtenberg, the resident dramaturg at the Shakespeare Theatre Company, and welcome to Shakespeare Hour Live, a special episode presented in collaboration with our friends at Mosaic Theatre Company. Tonight, we will be discussing the TILL Trilogy, the 3 shows currently running in repertory over at Mosaic. Before we get started, the Shakespeare Hour Live is made possible through the visionary support of the Beach Street Foundation. We thank them. Let me now introduce our panelists. Ifa Bayeza is an award-winning playwright, director, novelist, and educator described as breathtaking, staggering, extraordinarily lyrical, and triumphant. Her literary style and transcendent themes veer from the intimate to the mythic and compel us to re-examine the deeply embedded ideas that we attach to race and gender. Her plays include the TILL Trilogy, reimagining the saga of 1955 civil rights icon Emmett Till, String Theory on the 1839 Amistad slave ship survivors, Welcome to Wandaland, a childhood memoir, and Infants of the Spring, adapted from the classic Harlem Renaissance novel. She has written 3 musicals, the World War I love story Charleston Olio, Bunk Johnson, a blues poem on the legendary jazz originalist, and Kid Zero, a theater for young audiences hip-hop operetta, so a threat in multiple mediums. Her novel, Some Sing, Some Cry, was co-authored with her sister, herself a legendary playwright, the great Ntozake Shange. A 2022 MacDowell Fellow, Bayeza was a finalist for the 2020 Herb Alpert Award in Theater and the 2020 Francesca Primus Prize. In 2018, she was the inaugural Humanist in Residence at the National Endowment for the Humanities. Honors for the Ballad of Emmett Till, one of the plays in the TILL Trilogy, include the Edgar Award, the Backstage Garland Award, and fellowships from the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center and Brown University. A graduate of Harvard University, Bayeza received her MFA in theater from the same graduate department that my parents did, the University of Massachusetts Amherst in Western Mass, where I grew up. Ifa, hello, are you with us?
Yes, I am. So nice to see you, Drew.
It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be joined by you. And may I ask, Ifa, where in the world are you joining us from?
Well, I'm right around the corner in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Oh, Silver Spring, Maryland. So you are local to the DC area.
Yes, I am. I moved here in 2020, just before COVID sequestered everyone.
And what, may I ask, was this like a long intentioned move to the DC area? Do you have a prior history in DC? What stimulated your desire to join us in our amazing theatrical community here?
Well, 2 things, maybe 3. I originally came down for the then production rehearsal of the TILL Trilogy. A week into rehearsal, we got shut down. And I was thinking about I was living in Amherst, and I was thinking about where was I going to move? And then I'm like, okay, we're not moving anywhere now. And my sister lives in the area. She's in Cheverly, Maryland. And as I looked around, it occurred to me that the theater environment in the DC area was so much more vibrant than when I remembered it as a younger theater artist. And it felt like it was a place that could sustain a live arts artist like myself. So I took the leap, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I do think by various metrics, the Washington, D.C. area, including Southern Maryland and Northern Virginia, I think we employ the 2nd most actors outside of New York.
Wow.
Past Chicago by certain metrics. You know, we're neck and neck with Chicago, is what I'm saying.
That's a good horse race.
Good horse race to be in. And also the Amherst, Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. pipeline. There's you, there's me. Actually, the late Irene Poland, co-owner of the Washington Wizards and Capitals, has an Amherst connection, and she would commute between Amherst and DC. So yeah, there's kind of an interesting secret history there. Well, it's such a pleasure, Ifa, to talk to you tonight. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting us.
Also joining us is Talvin Wilks, the director of the TILL Trilogy. Talvin Wilks is a playwright, director, and dramaturg based in Minneapolis and New York City. His plays include Todd, the Boy Todd, The Trial of Uncle S&M, Bread of Heaven, An American Triptych, Jimmy and Lorraine, Amusing. That sounds like I can guess about who Jimmy and Lorraine are in that title. And As I Remember It with Carmen de Lavalade. Directing credits include many shows at the Penumbra Theater, The Peculiar Patriot at National Black Theater and Woolly Mammoth Theatre Company, Parks at the History Theater, Cannabis of Viper Vaudeville at Here Arts Center and La Mama, and the TILL Trilogy at Mosaic. Dramaturgy credits include Shangays for Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, the Tony-nominated Broadway revival, Dreaming Zenzele at the New York Theater Workshop, Between the World and Me at the Apollo Theater, Scat and Walking with Train with Urban Bushwomen, Inc. Black Girl Linguistic Play, Mr. Tully Ranch at Camille A. Brown and Dancers, and In a Rhythm, A History, Necessary Beauty, Landing Place and Verge with the B.B. Miller Company. He's a newly tenured associate professor in theater arts and dance at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and a 2020 McKnight Theater Artist Fellow. Talvin, hello, are you there?
I am here. Hello.
And I think I can guess, but where in the world are you joining us from, Talvin?
Well, I just got back to Minneapolis this afternoon from DC.
So you are in the Twin Cities.
I am in the Twin Cities.
And how are the Twin Cities? How is theater doing in the Twin Cities? I know that, like, there's a great theater scene in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and like all the theater communities, like I'm sure that the pandemic has been a hard one. Do you feel like theater is coming back in full force in the Twin Cities this year?
Well, I've been in DC for the past 2.5 months, so, so I'm not sure I'm going to catch it. Actually, I'm going to the theater every night the rest of this week. I'm going to a world premiere of David Harrison Rivers' play Weathering at Penumbra. I'm going to see Sally and Tom at the Guthrie. And I'm heading over to the university to see some studio plays. So I would say that, yeah, there's a real effort to return and lots of new work happening inside of the Twin Cities. So,
and Sally and Tom, of course, is the much anticipated world premiere of the new Susan Laurie Parks play at the Guthrie Theater, which I read about in the New York Times last weekend, and I'm so jealous that you get a chance.
No,
actually, a friend of mine, Luke Robertson, I think, is playing Tom in that show.
Okay.
So let me know how he does, Talvin.
I will.
And also thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And for your work on the TILL Trilogy. And last, but certainly not least, the dramaturg on the TILL Trilogy, Faedra Chatard Carpenter, is a theater and performance scholar, dramaturg, and cultural critic. Faedra has worked as a professional dramaturg on innumerable performance projects at venues such as Baltimore Center Stage. When I worked there for a couple years, we overlapped. Faedra, the Kennedy Center, Mosaic, Theater J, Dance Place, Crossroads Theatre Company, and Arena Stage. She is the author of the award-winning book, Coloring Whiteness, Acts of Critique in Black Performance, and her scholarly analysis can be found in a wide variety of anthologies and peer-reviewed journals. She has a PhD in drama from Stanford University, an MA in drama from Washington University, and a BA in English from Spelman College. Hello, Faedra, are you there?
I am here, Drew. Hello, hello.
And where in, I think in the DC area, but where in the DC area are you calling us from?
I am from Laurel. I'm in Laurel.
Laurel, Maryland. And how is Laurel, Maryland?
Or Laurel. We'd like to say
Laurel?
Laurel around here. Yes.
And how is Laurel? And how are you doing tonight?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much. We're great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have a very distinguished panel, and I can't wait to ask you about this extraordinary project at the TILL Trilogy. I also briefly want to introduce here and on the live chat, Sierra Culbertson, STC's events coordinator. Hello, Sierra, are you with us?
I sure am, Drew. How you doing?
And how is the chat doing? Is it lively? Are you livelying up the chat?
I am trying my best. We're warming up. Give it a few more minutes.
All right. Well, maybe they need some prompt questions or quotes to get them going. So yeah, please chat away if you're watching us live. Now, we are gathered tonight to talk about three plays: The Ballad of Emmett Till, The Summer in Sumner, and Benevolence. And I believe I have the order right. Ifa, correct me if I'm wrong. These three interconnected plays that are inspired by the story of Emmett Till that are playing in rotating repertory at Mosaic across town. And actually, just before we went live, Reg, the artistic director at Mosaic, was with us on the Zoom chat, and he said that the entire week of performances this week is completely sold out, which is astounding news to hear in this time of, theater coming back after 2.5 years of away. And also, Talvin, you were saying in the chat that you were, 4.5 weeks into rehearsals in 2020 when you got shut down?
Yeah, Aoife said we were 1 week into rehearsal. We were actually 4.5 weeks into rehearsal. We had already sort of worked through the Ballad of Emmett Till. We had begun 2 weeks working on That Summer in Sumner. We were about to return to Ballad, and we were 1 week away from tech. And that's when it all shut down in 2020.
Wow. So, and you were also saying that you spent 10 weeks of rehearsal time remounting it this time around, which is a very long time.
I won't even say remounting. This is mounting. This is all brand new. There were new team players, new actors this time around, so it was its own new beginning, and you see the results at the theater now.
Yeah, and it's amazing, to think about 10 weeks of rehearsal. Those are almost European, continental rehearsal timelines.
It's been epic.
Well, of course, you're rehearsing three different plays.
Right, and I mean, that was the whole kind of process in really thinking about how were we. It's a 10-member cast ensemble. They take on all the roles inside of the three plays, and so the real brilliance, I think, with an incredible team over at Mosaic, especially our production stage manager, Shane O'Neill, who really helped to navigate and think through the process of, we started with That Summer in Sumner because it was the new play and it's the fullest ensemble. And I just felt that it would be very important to anchor, all of the actors working inside of one of the first major stories. And then we had to think about, when do we shift over to Benevolence? There's a way that you can rehearse Benevolence, Act 1, and sort of come back later to Act 2. And so it really was quite an interesting logistical challenge in thinking about the development and the rehearsal of three plays inside of this cycle for them to all arrive one after the other in a rotating rep to open.
Yeah, and kind of how do you water a garden so that all of the flowers bloom at the same time, in a sense?
Are right on time.
Right. How do you make sure that these three different works, which are distinct from one another, are nourished and fed, and that they grow organically? And I'm curious, Ifa, really like thinking about Emmett Till, the narrative as history, as myth, as present day reality. I'm curious to hear, and I feel like I should acknowledge that my own subject position as a white man working in a historically white institution, it's probably a very different one from yours. What does it mean to you to revisit this pivotal event in the civil rights moment at a similarly tense moment in our own nation's history as we continue to grapple with these inequalities upon which the country was founded? It clearly was something that took more than just one play for you to process. So I'm fascinated to hear a little bit more about how you found your way in and how this project opened up to you.
Well, I was getting ready to answer one question, so let me start with that one. This idea of the work being history, the work being myth, and it also being resonant with today. And the reality is that because of our social and political history, the work is always resonant, because this very challenging pathology of race has been at the core of the foundation of our nation, and at the crux of its tensions. And so the Till story resonates as myth because metaphorically it is exploring a critical intersection that repeats over and over. Yeah, the challenge of Black people questing full humanity is ongoing, and so it always was. That's a central kind of theme of what I work in throughout my plays is exploring the full humanity of African people and our struggle, and putting it in the continuum of the drama of human life, so that while I'm doing a racial drama, I am really looking at a human drama where you are seeing, in this case, a failed rite of passage, a youth questing after the desire to grow up, to live, to become a man, to discover what that means. And the forces against him in our society become our race, and they continue to play out even today. There was a story of a policeman who was charged with murder for killing a youth at a McDonald's again. So coming back to Emmett's story, it has those elements of myth, it has those elements of history, and it still speaks to us today, so that we have a way to expiate our emotions and our the pain of grief, and how we transmute that grief into protest and ultimately into triumph as we continue to battle for full humanity and acceptance of our full humanity in the world and in our nation.
Yeah, as you say, you know, to steal a phrase from Shakespeare, the local habitation and the name may shift or change, but it is a story that tragically keeps on coming true or keeps on being relevant in our American society. And
Yes.
so that continues to resonate in an uncomfortable but very, very necessary and powerful way. I'm curious to hear, just if I can ask a follow-up question. Before we went live on air, you were talking about how these plays kind of nested within one another, that you wrote the Ballad of Emmett Till, and there was material you had to cut or you couldn't include in that play. And I think it was the trial scene. You said, oh, I have to write a trial play. And that became The Summer in Sumner. And then there was a monologue you cut from that play. And you said, oh, I really want to look at this Black community around Emmett Till. So it's so interesting because this is not a trilogy like the Oresteia, where you tell multiple generations of a linear story. It's three plays that resonate with one another and that have different characters and a different story in them. So I'm just curious if you could take us into your thinking on how you constructed these or how these plays constructed themselves out of one another. Well,
it definitely was construction. They didn't construct themselves. Talvin will tell you how many times we reworked That Summer in Sumner to try and get it right. That is the middle play, the trial play. And the process was really very organic for me, starting with the one act of doing Emmett and his mother in conversation as he wanted to go to Mississippi. And it ended with him getting on the train, getting ready to go. And I got so excited about that I said, well, let's take him on those 7 days. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to write his story about going to Mississippi. I don't know anything about Mississippi. So that then took me on a geographic journey down to Mississippi, learning how to pick cotton, visiting all of the sites of the last days of his life, and really set me on the quest of doing primary research to fill out the who this character was, because as much information as there was about the murder of Emmett Till and the trial of his killers, and his mother's valiant quest for justice throughout her life, there was very, very little about Emmett himself. And so the more I pursued that, the more fascinating he became. And so that led to the Ballad of Emmett Till being his saga. When I first did it, I tried to squeeze everything in there, and the play was too fat for me. So I distilled it down to the quest of the youth himself. But then I was missing the trial, as I told that I cut that little piece, which was only 20 minutes in my original version. And then I realized, well, if I'm going to get this right, because that was really important to me, how do I get this right? Then I needed to let the trial itself breathe. And that then opened up a whole other world of exploration of the multiple forces that were at play during the trial. It was almost like this chess game of white and black pieces, the civil battle of the courtroom, underneath which there was this medieval warfare, very, bloody, bloodlusting warfare going on underneath. And it allowed me to kind of explore the voices of our public thinkers in the form of the reporters who came down to cover the trial, and to explore their trial. So there's multiple trials going on, not just the trial of the killers, but the trial of the family, the trial of the reporters to get to the truth. So it became this really textured and rich, multi-leveled drama that was its own form, almost like the currents of a river. You had all these different storylines that we had to find, and that's one of the reasons that play took me so long to kind of figure out, how do I keep all of these stories in play at the same time. And then the last play, Benevolence, I did have some other scenes that I worked. I worked scenes to see who characters are. Even if a character has just a few lines, I try to make them as full as I can. And there was a monologue from Caroline Bryant that I cut, but it was so fascinating, in particular to a couple of friends of mine who said, you can't cut that monologue. I said, well, yeah, I had to cut it. So if I'm going to use it, then I've got to find context. And that opened up an opportunity for me to really look at the aftermath, to look at the impact of the story on the Delta through these two couples, a white couple and a black couple in segregated Mississippi. And that became its own saga as well. So the questing, I think my desire to really do honor to the story and to the richness that it offers for us to understand our history and the psychology of America, if you will, from these different vantage points. So I just followed those threads, and they led me to the trilogy.
Yeah, it's such an inspiring lesson to hear you talk. So it's an inspiring lesson in playwriting and in dramaturgy about the power of zooming in right? Rather than expanding a narrative to include all of the episodes that need to be in a play, actually removing details or removing extraneous action and zooming in on the real details of these people's lives and on the communities and on the relationships. Like, it's so much of playwriting, it seems to me, is about the deep focus, you know?
Yes, that was really a learning experience for me in distilling each work to the minimal number of characters. And originally, I was just trying to do this as an exigency because, you know, I was writing these social epics like String Theory and Infants of the Spring and you know, the Harlem Renaissance and on the Amistad and you know, I grew up on the great social dramas of the 50s and 60s, studying them in school, you know, so you're thinking The Crucible and you're thinking Death of a Salesman and even the Streetcar Named Desire, you know, those are big casts given what we're able, and of course Shakespeare, those are big casts compared to what we as playwrights are encouraged to do today. So what I learned from the process of distilling was that it does make it richer. To give you an idea, you know, when I distilled the Ballad of Emmett Till down to a cast of 6, another character emerged. Emmett's grandmother emerged as a character who had not been in my original understanding. And she became so in shrinking it expanded. And she became such an integral element to our understanding the richness of this extended family and the tightness of, like there's a line, my family is what you call tight knit, you know, how much they were, they bonded together as a family unit. And that came from chiseling down. So, and in the case of Benevolence, just looking at the overall impact of the Delta from its from the perspective of 2 couples was really a fascinating process for me.
Well, and you mentioned doing some research, which I hope we can touch on in the second half of the show when we discuss some text. But I'm also looking at your face, Faedra, as you're listening to Ifa talk. And you know, we were talking also before we went live on the air about your work as a dramaturg in kind of like helping to construct a timeline, connecting all these dots and fleshing out the history behind this kind of mytho-historical story that Ifa is creating. I'm curious to hear about that, and also like what your reflections are on this process of the distillation into these discrete plays that has a very fine-grained kind of deep focus quality.
Yeah, so I was really lucky in that I'm a dramaturg with the playwright in the room, right? The whole ensemble, and not only the playwright in the room, but Talvin being a director, a dramaturg himself, and having all this knowledge, all of this research. They've been working together for so long. So I was in a really unique position to glean and learn from them while also sort of being an insider outsider. And so one of the things I was charged and asked to do is, to try to, create sort of a timeline or a visual scape for the actors to follow, right? So what was fascinating is it was not until creating this timeline on the wall with visuals, having the 3 plays, if you can imagine, on the wall with tape, with pictures, but realizing clearly, distinctly that this is not a trilogy that goes in a chronological way, right? They are overlapping with each other. And it wasn't until putting them on the wall, you see that they are speaking, overlapping. It's like a contrapuntal narrative that's happening in different perspectives that are happening simultaneously and informing the movement. And one thing I had spoken of earlier is also it really showed where some of the historic gaps, some of the silences, because things haven't been documented. And Ifa has spent years and years uncovering stories and anecdotes, embodied research. She mentions going into the cotton fields. So at once being the creative and writing this play, but also being a historian and also throwing in a little, critical fabulation, right? Understanding that there are gaps in the narrative and what can she do in terms of bringing the art and the creative sensibility to flesh out that which hasn't been documented formally, but because she's talked to people, and because she's done this nitty-gritty research, discovered letters, heard, rumors and tales, in addition to going into the archives, what she's able to do and put together. And so for me to be able to then lean on that and then be of any assistance to the ensemble, by sharing that, underscoring that, making it more accessible to them was really a privilege. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you were speaking, Faedra, we had a couple questions come up live in the chat for Ifa and Talvin, but also we are at the 30-minute mark. So I want to take a quick break to talk about our next episode of the Shakespeare Hour, which is something entirely different from the TILL trilogy. The Course of True Love never did run smooth, especially when the on-air sign is lit. That's right, at the Shakespeare Theatre Company, we are going to be doing Much Ado About Nothing set in a Washington, D.C. cable broadcast newsroom with Benedict and Beatrice as sparring co-anchors with a love-hate dynamic with one another. Directed by Simon Godwin, internationally renowned on London stages, as well as here, our artistic director in DC, Much Ado About Nothing. The perfect blend, our marketing and communications department says, of sparkling screwball comedy and revelatory romance. So we will be talking about Much Ado About Nothing, which opens November 10th at Sidney Harmon Hall at STC. But we will be talking about it 2 weeks from tonight here on the Shakespeare Hour Live on Wednesday, October 26th. Not the 28th, which I thought it was, the 26th. So that's our mid-show plug. But I want to ask first, I think for Talvin, since we haven't heard from you in a while, you mentioned the logistical challenges. What are the biggest challenges a viewer wants to know of directing a group of actors in rep for a 3-play cycle? What was one of, or what are some of the biggest challenges in doing a project like this?
Well, I think the real challenge is really, I would say, affirming, strengthening, and nurturing everyone through the entire process, even when they're not directly involved in one play or another. I mean, we were very conscious as, it's been days since we've been back to Sumner, or if we're going to move through Ballad, we have to also put Act 1 of Benevolence in process. And so we had split studios, and I had a brilliant assistant director, choreographer, Sandy Holloway, who really, assistant is the wrong word. I mean, really a collaborator, a true collaborator in vision and co-visionary with all of us to help to realize sort of the movement vocabulary and all of that understanding. But the key was really in thinking about the 3 plays and really thinking about building the relationships and making sure, because everyone was hired at the very beginning, and they were going to take this full 10-week journey together, and that the plays do live inside of its own segregation in order to tell these stories. So there were times when, we have all Black cast, there are times we have the white cast, and then there are times they're so happy that they're all back together again, even though they're in this traumatic story they're telling together. It's sort of like reunions. We would actually have these sort of mini reunions along the way, because certain people would not have been in the room, or they would have been, sort of isolated in a particular way. So one of the real challenges was really to keep, not really a challenge, because the actors did an incredible job themselves in staying connected and really being supportive of each other. So it was just the idea of nurturing that ongoing idea of an ensemble, even when all of the players were not in the room all the time, and being able to check in and sort of monitor that. I think that was, I won't say the biggest challenge, but it was the biggest thing to be aware of, to make sure that everyone had a fulfilling process throughout the whole, 10-week period. That was one of my biggest concerns.
Yeah, and it's one of the funny things about, you hear this jargon term that gets thrown around now, race consciousness, when it comes to casting or rehearsing a show. But of course, when you do a show like this, it's already race conscious. We already live in a very race conscious world. This illusion that Shakespeare or classical theater is not race conscious already the lie gets quickly put to that. Faedra, you had your hand raised when Talvin was talking.
No, I just wanted to take this opportunity to speak to something I've written and talked a lot about, a dramaturgy of care. And I just wanted to say that that's what Talvin did, in a way that beyond the theory, beyond the talking head, I have never seen a director be so conscientious about the difficult, sticky material, and always being so cognizant of the ensemble, the racial dynamics, the sensitivities, the intimacy, being so conscious and always pulling people in, creating community. It was incredibly impressive, and it's part of what has to happen. This is a difficult play with so much labor and so much expense of energy and emotion, and it cannot be done without that nurturing and that sort of fortification. So I just wanted to give a special shout out to Talvin. That's how it's done. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, that's why it's hard to frame them as challenges. It's the mindful practice that we have to face if we're going to take on these challenging stories and sort of issues inside of our history, and sort of, use that as a, creative artistic forum for us all to come together and understand the beautiful stories and words that Ifa has given us to really connect to the complexity of the work. The actors are the front line, right? Frontline workers, sort of in that engagement. They take it on for us initially and have to navigate their own interpersonal, questions, concerns. We had incredible moments when, there was a clear moment, an actor said, I can't take this character home with me. I need to be acknowledged as myself, and I need to be able to leave her here. And so what I need as an actor is for us to have a process where I'm able to release that character before I leave the room. And we had been working, but that just became, that ongoing 5 minutes, at least 10 minutes, if possible, to just, say an actor's name. There was one actor, I just want someone to call me by my name before I leave, so that I can step away from this other character that I've been having to carry and this language that I've been having to say. So all of those things had to be built into the fabric of the process.
Well, it's very inspiring to hear that how the story is being told and rehearsed is as important as what the story is, that the same care is being taken in that regard. It makes me want to experience these plays even more hearing that. Ifa, there's a question for you about your sister, actually. Did you see the Camille A. Brown revival on Broadway? And if so, what did you think of it? And also a more substantial question about the TILL trilogy. You mentioned doing this archival and historical work and research in the Delta. So I'm wondering if there's a passage or a piece of text that you found that might be something we could unpack here in the second half of the show. So first Camille A. Brown, and then your own research.
So yes, I did see it. I was very intent on seeing it because I introduced Camille and Zaki with the intent of showing Zaki a variation of herself. I said, I went to see Camille at Jacob's Pillow. I can't remember what year this was. And at her Black Girl Linguistic work. And I had not seen it before, but as soon as I did, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, the next generation of Ntozake Shange, it was kind of the reverse. It was poetic choreography versus the choreo poem. So when Camille was doing a performance at the Kennedy Center, I told Zaki, you've got to come and meet her. And so from that initial exchange, the seed was planted, because Zaki had been talking about doing a revival. There was a lot of conversation about that. And so I said, well, if you don't necessarily think about a revival, think about maybe exploring the choreo in the choreo poem. And, it evolved the way it did and became just that, the exploration of the choreography within the choreo poem, the experience of dance and movement to a much more textured degree than the original production. And so I was thrilled that Camille was able to explore the elasticity of this classic piece of work and to really present it in to my mind, a glowing new way, and for another generation.
And I was the dramaturg.
Yes, right. So it's like we're a very much interlinked extended family.
Family affair. It's a family affair.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting.
It's a family affair. I keep popping in.
Right, exactly. There were some just marvelous things about it that still resonate. Yes.
Wow.
And then what was the other question?
Well, that's very special. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that I asked because, yeah, I mean, you never know what kind of amazing revelatory answer you're going to get to a innocent question. We have another question in the chat, which I think speaks to what Talvin was saying earlier. How did the cast not get very sad about the tragic story of Emmett Till? Which we can just ponder that one, it should make us sad, right? In some ways, but also maybe there are other things that can be taken away from the experience.
Well, it's part of the actor's process. I mean, they did live through sadness and grief. They do it now every performance. And then I think that was sort of why that particular process was necessary, and really our checkout moments, our checking in. We had a brilliant fight and intimacy choreographer, Sierra Young, who helped to guide us through that process. And everyone in the room was just very supportive in helping people sort of work through, move through, the courage it takes to take on a racist character and portray that role. And then the burden of having to utter that language with your colleagues, and then the acknowledgement of that and those exchanges, I think went a long way. And it took a while. It's not just you say, okay, these are the sort of ground rules, or these are the guiding principles. And then that they actually don't reach a moment of despair. I mean, that moment with one of our actors, Anna, who said, I've been taking Caroline Bryan home with me, and I have to tell somebody. I didn't intend to, and I'm surprised that, and it just has taken me 2 days to work through what I've just experienced in the room. So that notion of sharing and being able to, ask for the type of support that you need, and just people hearing that was happening was such a breakthrough, right? Because actors are very individual in a way, individualistic and caring for themselves and sort of focusing on their work. But the being able to allow people to express the things that they need and the support that they need in the room, I think became a very important part of that process. Yeah, Ifa.
Well, just to follow up on what Talvin was saying, but the very nature of drama, tragedy in particular, is sadness. But we go through this pain of experience to emerge with a triumph. When we come out of plays that are the great tragedies, we carry the sadness, but we also carry this renewal of the human community in the struggle through this trauma, be it Hamlet or be it Emmett Till. These are fundamental human questions that I hope the Till trilogy confronts. And then the works are what do I say? Each has its own timbre. The ballad is really just it's a joyous experience until it's not, but Emmett was such a joyful character. He was so full of life, and the family was so faith-based and internally loving, and so all of the strength in that human families, and in particular Black families, have used as a buttress against our oppression, were what make this family so vibrant that allowed them to, even in the midst of this great loss and tragedy, to persevere and to continue to struggle for justice for Emmett, and to use their family almost as a emblematic and symbolic for all families that are going through this. This made me sad, as Mrs. Till Mobley said, my son will not die in vain, because, I struggle on behalf of all of us going through this over and over again. So there's a triumphant spirit that comes out of that. And he was just such a delightful character to explore. And then in Sumner, because the perspective is from the vantage point of the reporters, the intellect and the wit and the sass of journalists trying to uncover the truth, but trying to outdo and scoop one another, it's its own energy, and the backstage drama of the lawyers. There's a satiric quality to Sumner that is, I think, quite exhilarating. And then Benevolence, as distorted as the pathology of race is, it's really a story of love and the quest for love, and how difficult that is in this kind of environment. But it's both the sense of romantic love and lust, all variations of love are within this one piece. So sadness is only one emotion that you will experience among many in looking at these three plays.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember when we we hadn't worked on ballad for a while, and the cast got back to ballad, and we were just sitting and laughing and just having a great time in the beginning of the play. They're like, "Oh, we're back to joy." So the plays have their own kind of sort of reward and support and release.
Yeah, and in a metadramatic sense, certainly the fact that we are all still here so many years later, commemorating the life of this human being, right, in all of its importance and significance, world historical importance and significance, right, means that the takeaway is not just sadness, but also, how important it is to commemorate, to remember, to make these people come back to life again through the power of the theater, which is certainly something Shakespeare was very interested in, that when people die in real life, they go away, but the theater can bring them back to life in a way, which is certainly something that I tell myself, Drew, why am I still working in the theater? And it's like, well, this is why I'm still doing this, right? Because this is what the theater does that not really any other art form quite manages to do. I am now rambling. I'm not asking a question.
No, well, his history plays were very much a model for me in that, they are embedded and they're great dramas, but they also, kind of lay a foundation of social political history of England and British civilization, and that continue to resonate today. And to me, the saga of Emmett Till is of that nature. It is a foundation myth of modern America. So I wanted to use the form of drama to establish that, so that it is first and foremost a drama that is telling our history. And as Frederick Douglass kind of suggested, he had this wonderful quote about the importance of the fugitive slave narratives, that we have to tell these stories to change the national memory, to establish the national memory in a particular way. And that's also what we're trying to do with this work.
Well, what I was hinting at, 20 minutes ago before we went to this amazing, very, very rich field of inquiry, was the research that you found in the Delta. Because we have about five or so minutes left, Ifa, and I'm wondering, is there a passage similar to this Douglas quote that you could share with us, like a little bit of a nugget, just to kind of wet our beak, so to speak?
Okay. Yes. My biggest find in terms of a researcher and historian was a letter that Emmett wrote to a teenager. She was actually 2 years older than he, Heloise Woods. And it was the only information that I found of Emmett Till in his own voice that was not a letter to his mother, but was, really a very courtly gesture toward another adolescent. And that it became its own scene. There was so much that I learned about Emmett from that. And the scene is it's a dramatic extrapolation of what is actually in the letter. So let me share that with you. Okay. I promise I won't look at them. He's talking to his mother said, you can't go to Mississippi. You do not look at them. You do not look at white women down there. Yeah, okay. Mail come yet? What? You're going to Detroit with us, and that's final. Okay, Ma, okay, I promise. I won't look at them. Look, my eyes are closed. They don't look. But Mama don't know. I'm from Chicago. Girl watching in the summer. Wear a brother out. You die and go to heaven every day. It's a national pastime. The girls bloom like flowers in the summer, man. You got tulips, roses, daffodils, bluebells, buttercups, Venus flytraps. I step out, hair pressed flat, pant line pat, a ripple and a sheen and a dip that's mean. I met this girl last May. Of all places, Argo. Church went up to a carnival. Heloise Woods. Ooh, okay. I bought a ticket at the carnival to ride on the thing. We were standing in line getting on 2 by 2, Noah's Ark. I'm moving right along beside her, counting to make sure we end up together in the same car. And Curtis, baby, Curtis jumps the line. I push past him and just make it pow. Now I'm sitting right next to her. Our own car, an aerial carriage. The chains rattled the seats. Then up it started. Up we going. Up we went. She draws close, one hand round my girl, and you're praying, yes, and it stops at the very top. The stars out, carnival lights below, the car swinging in the breeze. Woo-wee! Just her and me, and Mama wants to go on a road trip. I tell you, I had to write the girl a letter. Dear Heloise, I'm not coming out in Argo Saturday because my mama wants me to go to Detroit. I liked it when I was out there, when we went out to that carnival. Cutest little thing. Beautiful brown skin like a piece of milk chocolate. Long, pretty hair. Met a little girl named Heloise, wrote her a letter to be my squeeze. Sorry, baby, I can't come to town, but I sure want to see you, girl, next time I'm around. Remember M, remember E, put them both together and remember me. EMMNETT, hey, pretty baby, remember me. Emmett Lewis, still from Chicago, but you can call me Bo. Want to know the truth? We finished the ride. I stood up there. All I could say was, bye.
Wow. Oh my God. We're all applauding on our screens. That was a virtuoso performance.
Now, he's just easy. And all of it, the song came out of the little rhyming couplet that he used to close the letter. That is all Emmett Till. And so it just was just a joy to share his life and to, through this one life, show how precious it is and hopefully get people to think more acutely about the preciousness of the lives of our children.
Well, it has been an hour on the Shakespeare Hour, and I can't think personally of a more beautiful, sublime note really to end on than that inspired performance and that thought. And my 3.5-year-old son Dylan is watching me on the computer tonight, so I can say, go to bed, Dylan. Your life is precious. You need to go to bed. I want to thank you, Faedra. Thank you, Talvin. Thank you, Ifa. Thank you, everyone watching at home, for this really unforgettable conversation, which I'm going to cherish for a very long time. Please go see the TILL trilogy. It's currently performing at Mosaic Theatre. It runs until November 20th, so you have plenty of time. And join us in 2 weeks on October 26th, when we discuss Much Ado About Nothing. From me, I'm Drew Lichtenberg, signing off. Thank you, and good night.